I never believed in fate. Thought it was all just fiction created by romantics and dreamers, until I met her. It happened on an ordinary fall day in Boston. A light drizzle was falling, and I was rushing to the bookstore before closing time. She was standing by the classics section. Her auburn hair was gathered in a messy bun, and she wore thin-framed glasses on her nose. Our eyes met when we reached for the same book simultaneously, an old edition of The Great Gatsby. "Sorry," she said, and her voice seemed familiar, as if I'd heard it in dreams 1,000 times. I let her have the book, and we started talking. Her name was Anna. An odd coincidence, wasn't it? That evening we talked until the store closed, and then for 2 more hours in a small coffee shop around the corner. She was a literature professor, loved Hemingway, and couldn't stand Faulkner. She collected vintage postcards and knew how to play the violin. The next 3 months were the happiest of my life. We walked through Central Park, watched old movies, and read aloud to each other. She taught me to see beauty in small things, in raindrops on window glass, in the rustling of leaves underfoot, in the smell of old books. I fell in love. For the first time in my 40 years, I truly fell in love. And when Anna suddenly said she was leaving to teach in another state for a year, my heart broke. But we decided to wait. I promised to write to her every day, and she promised to call whenever she could. The first month, I sent letters faithfully. I told her about my days, about books I'd read, about movies I'd watched. She called rarely, said she was very busy in her new position. I understood and didn't push. After 2 months, her calls became even more infrequent. Then they stopped altogether. I continued writing, letter after letter, day after day. I told her everything as if she were right beside me. Sometimes I called her, but no one ever answered. I comforted myself with the thought that she was just busy, that things would work out soon. I sent her 247 letters, and didn't receive a response to a single one. After 8 months, I finally decided to visit her. I found the address of the university where she worked and set off. The dean of the faculty looked at me strangely when I asked about Professor Anna Mitchell. "We've never had a professor by that name," he said, and the ground disappeared from under my feet. I showed him her picture, but he just shook his head. The hotel address she had given me didn't exist either, nor did the street it was supposedly on. Returning home to New York, I began searching for information about her online. Nothing. Not on social media, not in teacher databases. Nowhere. As if Anna Mitchell had never existed. I had almost convinced myself I was going crazy when I came across that same book, The Great Gatsby, that she had bought that first evening. On the flyleaf was an inscription: "When reality becomes unbearable, create your own. A.M." And then I understood. Anna had never existed. I had invented her. After my wife's death 5 years ago, I couldn't cope with the loneliness, and my mind created the perfect companion. The coffee shop where we supposedly sat had closed 2 years earlier. No one saw me talking with her because I was always alone. I sent 247 letters to a non-existent address, and I bought the book myself and wrote the inscription myself. But you know what? I continue to write to her, because sometimes an imagined love brings more happiness than real solitude. And every evening, I wait for a call that will never come. Then yesterday, someone knocked on my door. There she stood, Anna, with a suitcase and that same book in her hands. "Sorry it took so long," she said. I had to go much further than I had planned, and she handed me a stack of my letters. All 247, unopened. "I didn't read them," she said. "I wanted you to tell me everything yourself." I looked at her, not understanding what was real and what wasn't. But then she touched my hand, and I felt the warmth of her skin. Sometimes the most incredible stories turn out to be true, and sometimes the truth turns out to be more incredible than any story. But now I know one thing for certain. She's real, and nothing else matters.